Hello, everyone. Welcome to another forecast. It's Dr. Claire Moon of Aligning Light Astrology, and today we're going to be talking about January 2025, which is amazing as always. I know everyone says this all the time, but every year it happens faster. Welcome if you're joining me today. I do have a chat on the right-hand side of your screen. There is about a 20-second delay. I do try to keep up with the chat. And then if you're listening to this a little later, if you have any questions, stories you feel like sharing, you can put them below in the comments. I try to keep up with that regularly. I have announcements. I always do. I am still booking as usual. www.aligninglightastrology.com is my website where you can book a reading, you can read my writings, and that's where if I do written horoscopes, they're on there. I have my newsletter sign up, which is just my once monthly one-stop shop, link for all my events, discount codes, et cetera, et cetera. For 2 more days, I have a discount code SEAGOAT for 10% off. If you are over, what did I say? 55, 65? Just anyone over that age gets a 10% discount. It's called Thanks or Thank You. It's on the website. And then I have another discount code for, I always forget it every time. I'll see if it comes to me later. But if you sign up for the newsletter, you can get my monthly discount code. Let's see. I think that's it. Everything is the same. I'm going to link it all below, but I do have some rising sign horoscopes for the upcoming Capricorn New Moon that's happening in 2 days on the 30th of December. And I also did a 2025 overview of some transits I think are important. So it's not an all-inclusive, overview of 2025. It is pretty, I don't do rising sign horoscopes. It's pretty general, but I did put a lot of practical nuggets that I think will be helpful, some practical advice that might be helpful for some of the transits that we're going to be experiencing next year. And I think that's it. I think those are all of my announcements. Hello, everyone. Hello, Sama. Hello, KP1231. Happy Capricorn season. It's my time. I'm a Capricorn sun. And it's really funny because I'm also a Capricorn sun in the 12th. And so I often forget my birthday. I was telling the story on Threads, but I just got my Christmas card from my aunt. I have a lovely aunt who sends me a Christmas card every year. And I took 2 greeting cards out of my mailbox from my aunt. And of course, I open the first one, it's for Christmas. And then I see the second one from my aunt, and I think, for a good 10 seconds as I'm like trying to get it open, I'm really seriously considering if my aunt is having memory difficulties in her older age. Like, why would she send me 2 Christmas cards? She must have forgot. And then I opened it and it reminded me that it was my birthday. And this happened on my birthday. So just to give you an idea, 12th house life, sun, particularly sun in the 12th house life, being my birthday is right after the holidays. Usually I'm traveling back from my parents or I'm still in my parents' basement on my birthday doing nothing. So yeah, it was another year of that. It was definitely another year of that. I did have a friend send me some baked goods, so that's always great. But in any event, I'm rambling and I have a lot to talk about today. Yeah, thanks everyone. So I definitely riff on Capricorn in the rising sign horoscope. I'll be riffing on Capricorn a bit today as well, if you're interested in that. I really love I'll have to link it below later. But there's a lecture from Jason Hawley, who is a different astrologer. He's excellent. He's more of a modern psychological astrologer, but has like a good root with the Hellenistic stuff too, I believe. But anyway, Jason Hawley does this really great lecture on Capricorn where he talks about the myth of Enki. And that is at astrologyuniversity.com somewhere. So Google search terms. It's a really good one to get a solid footing on what Capricorn is about. And I think it's a much more humane kind of take on Capricorn than just like this Machiavellian, dry mountain climbing goat that just like doesn't care. I don't think that's the whole story, but let's talk about some dates of interest. Let me get my notey notes. I'm going to do some old business. hopefully, if I remember and my ADHD doesn't get the best of me, we'll also do a meditation time today, a very short one. And we might be here. We're probably going to be here for an hour and a half. Come and go as you please. You do not need to feel bad if you need to step out. And we'll also, before we get into the new business, yeah, we'll have some reflection time on what December has been because there's been some things. Okay, dates of interest. On the 2nd of January, 2025, we've got Mercury leaving their post-retrograde shadow. On the 2nd of January, we also have Venus entering Pisces. On the 6th, Mars is returning, re-entering Cancer. On the 8th, Mercury enters Capricorn. On the 11th, we've got, if you're doing the true node calculation, we've got the lunar nodes changing axes into Virgo Pisces. That is on the 29th of January, if you're using the mean calculation, which we will get into. On the 13th, we have a Cancer full moon. On the 14th is approximately when Mercury begins to disappear from our morning sky and become invisible. On the 19th, the sun is going to enter Aquarius. On the 27th, Mercury will follow suit and also enter Aquarius. On the 28th, Venus is going to enter their pre-retrograde time. On the 29th, we're going to have an Aquarius new moon. And on the 30th, a Uranus direct station. Uranus is stationing direct at the end of the month. So I also really failed in December. So going to old business, I failed to cover New Year's Eve. So I guess I'm going to start today, being I'm catching everyone as I record this on the 28th of December. I'm going to begin the talk today actually a little earlier on the 31st. So let me bring up the circle here. Make sure there's no chats. Oh, we got some other Capricorns in the chat. Hello, other mermaid goats. Hello, Kai. Welcome back. Reverend Kai. Got another astrologer in the chat. All right. So let's look at the very end of December that leads us into as our first point of old business that I really should have went over the last time. But let's start with December 31st, and then we'll do some reflections. But I just want to get this right out front because I know a lot of people are going to be celebrating New Year's Eve. And I mean, long story short, it's not the best astrology weather. It's not my favorite. We do have the moon with the sun in Capricorn. It is a low light, pretty much no light. We cannot see the moon at this point. It hasn't popped back out with its little crescent yet, growing in light. So it's a little lower energy. So that's thing one, which is fine. I mean, there's a lot of gatherings and celebrations that don't have to be like a rave. But if you are planning on going to a rave-like atmosphere for New Year's Eve or something like that, yeah, I don't know how, depending on exactly when your celebrations are, I don't know how rave-like it's going to feel. The moon is, and this is my main trepidation about the whole thing, is that the moon is going to be applying as it comes out of this new moon on the 30th. It's going to be coming into this Pluto-Mars opposition. Now, I know I was kind of like looking around on the internet during Christmas, and I guess Christmaka, Hanukkah also started on that day this year, which was kind of a big deal because they usually don't align because they have different calendars. But like I was looking at the internet and people were not loving the weather on that day. That was when the moon was square to this stuff, when it was in early Scorpio and a Libra, early Scorpio. People didn't love that. I think anytime the moon is hitting this configuration at a right angle or on it or opposite to it or whatever, we're feeling a bit of the crunchiness of that Mars-Pluto opposition, which is what that is, that kind of energy. I mean, it's really powerful. It's intense. If you've got some work or something to just kind of push through that's difficult, it can be really helpful for that. But it can also be Mars and Pluto getting out of hand in terms of too much power, too much intensity, power struggles, power dynamics, conflict getting a bit larger than it needs to be. So, or distortions with conflict. It's not like my favorite. It has its purposes. Everything has its utilities. It really depends on what you're doing that day. This isn't what I would pick for a party. So I just want to point that out. If you're driving somewhere for a party and someone is being road ragey, ignore them. Just because the weather is happening doesn't mean it has to your emotions kind of getting carried away with it, or we don't have to. If even those transits are coming out inside of us, we always have the choice of how to navigate that stuff. And so if other people are seemingly not navigating it as well, yeah, love them from far away. Um, it is I believe there is a bit of a malefic enclosure of the moon as well. So this is going to be, let me bring our attention to the AstroSeek Lunar Enclosure Calculator. That is a really great tool from astroseek.com that helps us and it helps me. That's what I use just as a quick thing, so I don't have to use my eyes and my brain to find all of the lunar enclosures. But we can find these days where the moon is sandwiched in between more intense, extreme, less comfortable energies versus days when the moon is sandwiched in between more helpful, soft, helpful type energy, supportive energy. And unfortunately, the moon is going to be at some point here, and let me give you the exact points because I have them. So universal time, Greenwich Man time, this lunar enclosure, this window, this particular one, this malefic lunar enclosure, it's not like the best weather for doing stuff that you want to have be really comfortable or fun or carefree. If you're doing hard work or doing something intense, that could really fit this weather. Like if you're scrambling to do the last minute of setups for your party or something, if you're the host, this kind of fits. But it's all day on the 31st, essentially. So Greenwich Man Time, Universal Standard Time, 1:02 a.m. on the 31st of December. Or, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's Central Time. Here is Greenwich Man Time. That is 7:02 in the morning on the 31st. So it gets cooking right in the beginning of the day there till January 1st. And that's going to be at 1:52 p.m. that it ends. So in the afternoon, after everyone has their events for New Year's. The further globally east we go, the longer this kind of difficult weather hangs around. Now, if you're in Central Time like me, this starts at 1:02 a.m. on the 31st, is on all day on New Year's Eve, and then completes at 7:52 in the morning on the 1st of January. So, I mean, just have tempered expectations. It's not as buoyant and light of a type of weather that that I would want to have for a party. Again, one of the moon's main conversations here and the sun is with Saturn. So, they're not really, when the moon at least is in Capricorn, it's not interacting with Venus, Jupiter, Mars directly, or Mercury. It's kind of just this more serious, realistic, maybe morose conversation with Saturn, albeit maybe helpful, realistic, constructive, but not, again, it's not buoyant. I don't know. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and I think a lot of us are aware of it. And having parties and celebrations might not feel natural. And so I kind of wonder too if it's just not if you're someone who's paying attention to the news, the world at large at all right now, I can understand why partying might not feel like the thing to do. And I expect the weather to kind of reflect that more than anything. So, and that, again, that's my own bias coming in, but that's what I've been noticing. That's what I noticed for the current holidays that we're in, is that a lot of people are struggling with, kind of just going through the motions of the traditions of their family and having kind of this heaviness of what's going on in the world going on. So that might be all that it is in terms of like not the best New Year's Eve celebration weather. At the same time, I will say it is important to celebrate. It's important to find connection with each other during the holidays. That is super duper healthy. Yeah, I don't need the wheel to say this, but all to say, just because celebration might feel difficult or unnatural right now, I can see reasons for it because that those moments of joy and peace and rest and connection are what fuel us to keep fighting the good fights, you know? So, with that, that's my New Year's Eve forecast. Let me see if there's any things in the chat. There are not. Well, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful stuff in the chat, but nothing I need to attend to. And if you do have any questions, and I am going to just skip over like a number of days at a time here, I'm going to try to keep to my little list of dates of interest. But if I do skip over something you wanted me to talk about today, just let me know. Okay. Now, some old business. Jupiter is still retrograde, but at least now they've gotten past their second square with Saturn. So let me show you that. Jupiter's been doing this square dance with Saturn. I mean, really all of 2024. It peaked in August of 2024. This square, this energy of growth versus limitation, going forward and progressing versus delay or slowness, gaining versus loss. So very different types of energies. And us needing to make pivots, adjustments, dealing, with the fact that Saturn has the larger voice here and is saying no to some of our progress or wait, or here's this obstacle you must overcome on your way, to passing go and collecting $200. So it's not like the most carefree, light type of energy, but I will say that by, at least after the 24th of December, now Jupiter has gotten past that. They'll have their final one of those in June of 2025. That's the last time that we'll have this square Jupiter Saturn energy. And then it's going to start to move into a trine, which is going to be those topics of growth and decay, of going forward versus stalling. That stuff starts to be less crunchy, starts to be a little bit more easeful in those world buildings that we are all doing at any given time. So happy to see that configuration start to break apart a bit. I do have a workshop as well on this that is going to be linked below if it's not already. That is going to be like 2 to 3 hours of listening, of experimenting with your own chart that I have available for purchase on Podia for $15. So if you want to really dig into what Jupiter and Gemini is doing, as well as what this Jupiter-Saturn square is up to, then that's a good workshop for you. So check that out. And at this point too, I did want to mention, so the very end of December, like today, we are having the Venus-Uranus square. We've been having, actually it was like the 27th, 28th. And this can be a time of Venus running into doing things differently. Venus experimenting, Venus having to move along despite interruptions, disruptions. Venus maybe needing some distance or independence. And so our relationships taking on some of those qualities, maybe our art projects, maybe the ways that we're being creative are being disruptive. And, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. Very much this. So in your pursuits of love, romance, beauty, justice, if you are running into interruptions at the end of December, yes. If you are running into, hey, I might need more space in my relationships for a minute, kind of an inconvenient time for it, honestly, for many of us. But if you can grab some space today on the 28th, 29th, by the 30th, they'll start to get some space from Uranus. But right now, too, if there's any disruptions in getting to parties, making connections, interruptions in communication with people in important relationships, that can all be, square Uranus type of stuff happening. But it can also be a great opportunity to experiment, try new things with beauty, love, art. And on that note, I did just randomly yesterday. I saw it. It was on PBS NewsHour. It was the perfect Venus-Uranus square story example. I'm gonna link it below here. But it's about the ballet, and I don't remember what state they're in, but check out that story. It's like a 13-minute listen. It's really short. But essentially, the one of these really big ballets was doing the Nutcracker, and they got an update where they actually had the lead male character, who is usually the Nutcracker, who is usually this Caucasian-headed Nutcracker. They made them black. So we had our first black Nutcracker, to my knowledge, that where that the costume actually matches the person. So that was really beautiful. And then they also got an update too, which unfortunately in the original Nutcracker story, there is essentially, and they say this in the story, that there's essentially yellow face, where it's like a caricature of some Chinese types of dance. And in this version, they actually hired a Chinese choreographer to help with those types of things, or someone who was like an expert in that type of dance, and they redid it. So they redid that scene. So it got a huge update, very different than what we've had in the past. And I thought that was just such a beautiful representation, especially of what can happen when we have Venus in the overcoming position. Venus's voice here is stronger. So the voice of connection is stronger. The voice of justice, fairness, equity is going to be the stronger voice on top of the disruption or interruption or change. And in the end, we're going to see, yeah, connection wins out, equity wins out, and some kind of change is involved. So I thought that was cool. Check out that really great story. Thank you, PBS NewsHour, of course. All right, we got a question here. What happens when a new moon is taking place at an important angle in the birth chart? Yeah, it gets louder. It's more important, and it's going to have to do with those topics. So let's see if we can find an example. Yeah, here we go. So let's pretend for this like Cancer rising that they're having, like, let's say theoretically their natal chart is Cancer rising, and they're having this new moon in their seventh house on an angle. And these angles are the most highly energetic points in the chart, and they speak to these really important topics of like who you are, the first house, where you came from, the fourth house, who you're here with, the seventh, what are you doing when you're here, what's your practice, the 10th. These are these big things in life. And so they do carry a lot of weight and importance. And the angles themselves, whatever degree they're at, so here we see the descendant is at 9 degrees at the moment, the exact moment of this new moon. Let's say that this is a theoretical person who has their natal descendant at 9 degrees of Capricorn. This is the most concentrated degree of those house topics. So of, in this case, partnership, business partners, marriage partners, best friends, open enemies. This would be a new start with any of those topics. And for better or for worse, that's the larger question I can't answer without seeing your chart. However, yeah, it's going to really be like those new moon beginnings, endings, wrapping up, regrouping around partnership stuff and really strongly. But by degree, these are just the most energetic and loud of those points. And so anything close to it is just going to get louder, louder, more apparent, more important. So, sometimes illumination comes and goes, and I myself am like, I don't know what that was about. I didn't see anything new coming. Sometimes there's a full moon. I'm like, it wasn't for me. It was for someone else. I have nothing going on. No realizations, nothing culminating. I'm not releasing anything, giving anything out to the world. But, if it's on your angle, I would expect someone to be like, oh, yeah, it's about this. It's about a partnership thing. Or I'm having a realization about being in partnership or something. The Greek astrologers, or not the Greek, geez Louise, I am tired. The astrologers who practiced Hellenistic astrology, they would call these angles krematistikos, which meant just like highly energetic, kind of goaded point where if it's an animal, as if it were an animal being prodded with a stick. It's like got a lot of energy. It's like, get going. Something's going on. Something's happening. So these points are very energetic. Louder. Short answer, louder. Thank you for that question. That's great. And yeah, the biggest thing is just like And the best way to use this information with any of my forecasts, any of my rising sign stuff, is to find your rising sign. And so if anyone, not saying the person in the chat needs this, but in case anyone's listening, if you need to find your rising sign, check out Chani Nicholas's website, astro.com or AstroSeek. Those are my favorite free chart generator places. Right. And did I finally get through all of my old business? I think so. Just remember to check out that new moon in Capricorn rising sign horoscope that I made. Everyone be careful on New Year's Eve. We got our dates of interest. Let's do a little meditation-y time. And one I've probably done before, but it's my favorite. Then we'll get into new stuff. So I've been digging this one called Strong Back, Soft Front by Roshi Joan Halifax. And this is also my gym routine these days because I need to stretch out my front and make my back stronger. Very fun. So if you are not into this, that's totally cool. Go grab a snack. We'll be done in a few minutes. But if you do want to stick around, you don't have to be sitting or standing or anything in particular. You could be doing anything right now. And you can just put your attention on the breath. And on an inhalation, gather your attention. Release distractions. If only it were that easy. On an inhalation, gather our attention. On the exhalation, drop your attention into your body and relax. Sense your spine, which exemplifies equanimity. Through your strong back, you can be with whatever is present. Experience the front of your body as open, receptive, and permeable. Through your open heart, let the world into your experience. Let your strong back and open heart give you genuine presence. Strong back, soft front, equanimity, compassion. Yeah, I love that one. And it made me think of too, I feel like I heard this from Joseph Goldstein, and he heard it from one of his teachers, who I'm forgetting. And it also could be Ram Dass, but equanimity, one of the ways, because it's such like a triple word score word. Equanimity can be emotionally, mentally, but it means essentially balance, being detached emotionally, and being able to be with pretty much everything in a way that where you don't get carried away by your emotions, you don't get overwhelmed by emotions or fear or whatever it is, and that you can be calmly with whatever is present in order to be able to respond to whatever is present as skillfully as possible. Equanimity. This also helps with having patience with other people, loving other people, being with our own biases and seeing those directly and working through our own biases. So equanimity is really important, but I do like to just use the word balance, but also those other teachers, Joseph, Ram Dass, whoever it was, they would say for equanimity, this too, and this too. This thing that I'm hearing right now, yes, that too. This thing I'm seeing right now that's very disturbing, yes, this too exists. This too is present, and I am present with it. And so just having that, and in that kind of, oh yes, this too, that kind of also speaks to that open-heartedness, that openness that is kind of part of the package deal of equanimity. So I really love that kind of way of being able to hold what is difficult, because there's lots of things to hold that are difficult right now. And just because we try to be in this state of equanimity and cultivate that as a muscle, which has been very hard for me personally. It's one of my tougher points because I get pretty riled up about stuff. Um, but it's just it is such an important thing in these times to cultivate some kind of balance. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing that with me. It helps me to also be grounded because this astrology can have us so brainy and in our minds and thinking all these big thoughts and fast thoughts and many thoughts. And so, coming back to the body, bringing attention to the body, if that's a safe thing for you to do, is usually a nice way to ground our astrology a little bit or ground ourselves while we're using the tool of astrology. Okay, let's get into some new stuff. Let's talk about, oh my gosh, thank goodness. Mercury's coming out of their post-retrograde stuff. So we have had a really long story with Mercury, and I did make rising sign horoscopes last month about this Mercury-Jupiter stuff that's been happening across Gemini and Sagittarius. And that was really like a 2-month long narrative, a 2-month long story that is wrapping up on the 2nd of January. We're getting out of the post-retrograde phase with Mercury. And so any Mercury retrograde things that got delayed, stalled, miscommunicated, misunderstood should be tying themselves up in a nice, neat little bow, hopefully by the 2nd, or hopefully are already resolved just in time for a nice new moon. We're really getting Mercury also straightened out, and anything that's again been, a little bit more complex in November, December should be a little better in January. My own personal example of this that happened was and maybe TMI, but also I'm a medical person, so I don't really care. And I think it's good to talk about these things. But I think part of my Mars retrograde for me is going to be getting a different IUD. And Mercury went retrograde just as I was putting in an application for financial assistance for that process. And that application got lost on the nurse's desk for 3 weeks until Mercury stationed direct, and then she found it. And I was like, sorry, it got lost. Like, it's fine. I wasn't mad because I'm like, yeah, why am I handing in things during Mercury retrograde? Or if I am, like, and they get delayed, yeah. So that was mine. I know I try to make Mercury retrogrades help us to see them as more constructive because there's also like so many things that I always learn. I figure things out that I've been working on for a long time. I go back to things that needed to be read or listened to or said during a Mercury retrograde. But I don't want to get so Pollyannish about it because I see people online being like, Mercury retrogrades are fine. There's nothing to worry about. Don't let anyone scare you. But I'm like, my application got lost for 3 weeks. Like, oh, this light, it's on my face. My application got lost. Okay, bad things still happen. That's not a good thing. Thank God I know astrology. Back in the day, a lot of my patients didn't, and they were mad, and they did not understand astrologer good. So, okay, we've got two sides of this thing. I'm gonna change my video here for a second so I can deal with this beautiful light that's just slapping me in the face. Ah, oh my goodness. Okay, did you hear all my movings around? I did it. I just had to close the blinds. Now the sun is low enough in the sky to actually come through my window, but it's also low enough in the sky to come through my window. Thank you. So, okay, just to say all the dates for the Mercury thing that we just went through. Um, Mercury entered their pre-retrograde time on the 7th of November. So way back, like 2 months ago. They stationed retrograde on the 25th of November, which is probably when I handed in my application. They stationed direct on the 15th of December, which was great because it was just enough time for us to, get our last minute gifts sent in the mail. And then as of the 2nd, they are back to 22 degrees of Sagittarius and they'll be done with all that. On that same day, Venus is going to be entering into Pisces. Let's take a look at that. That also happens on the 2nd. And this is maybe our first little thing to note in terms of what's going to be a much longer Venus story as they are in Aries and Pisces, really until April of 2025. So let me, yeah, they're finally going to be done with this whole thing. Is it really June 5th? Wow. Yeah. So Venus will finally get into Taurus on June 5th. We're going to spend the first half of the year, I guess, with Venus just being in Pisces and Aries. Now, Venus is a really helpful planet. Venus is harmonizing. They represent harmony. And so even though it might be kind of hard in Aries, when Venus is in Pisces, I mean, that might be a really great time to cultivate strength in relationships, to shore relationships up for when Venus goes into Aries. So I'm really excited for Venus to go into Pisces. They had to deal with that Mars-Pluto stuff as they went and entered into Aquarius. As they've been in Aquarius, they haven't been super supported by Saturn. And so this will be the first time, really for quite a while, that Venus has been in any kind of decent dignity. So I think that'll be really helpful for relationships, art, beauty, love, justice in January. They will be with Saturn, of course. They're going to be with Neptune. So all of this stuff with Saturn and Neptune and dealing with what is real, not real, fake news, real news, what the structures are going to be or which ones Neptune is going to dissolve, all of that is going to get much more of a relational tone in the next month of January. So it could be a very relational month in some serious ways. Saturn is a planet of commitment and structure and duty and obligation. They are also a planet of healthy boundaries and saying no. So we might find ourselves exercising both of those things. Which relationships do I want to commit to? What work needs to be done here with Saturn? Also, where might I need to have healthy boundaries, have some distance, some space? Saturn is also that. Doing our best to be as honest as possible. Pisces is not dishonest. Neptune and Saturn are. Saturn is the Lord of secrets. Neptune is a planet of deception and illusion. When I get them together, that is one possibility. You know, Saturn also says what's real. So it's really interesting that Saturn can be both what is very realistic, but historically in the Hellenistic tradition, they were also secrets. And maybe that has something to do with Saturn having their joy in the 12th house of hidden things and secrets. But yeah, doing our best to be as honest as possible in a way that with Pisces is going to be in the name of goodwill, acceptance, peace. Because of course, when Venus gets into Aries, it's going to be a little different. They will enter Pisces early morning on the 3rd for Greenwich Man Time, Universal Standard Time at 3:23 a.m. on January 3rd. Venus will enter Pisces. It's later in the night on the 2nd, the more globally west time zones you are, and they will be in there until February 4th. So almost that exact month in Pisces. I guess last thing I'll say, you know, Pisces is a place where Venus is exalted, meaning that we are going to see Venus at some of their most powerful, most intense Venus, which when Venus is really intense, I mean, that can be very glamorous and luxurious and like ooey gooey romantic. Now, Saturn is going to dial that romanticism down a little bit. They're not the most erotic planet, but that's okay. I don't mind that. I'm Saturn. I would say that. But yeah, Venus is really romantic in here. And so I guess, you know, if you are dating people when Venus is in Pisces, make sure that you know what's really going on. Might just make sure it's not illusions or delusion, because it could be, but it also might be if it's a shorter thing. I mean, perfect time for like romantic, just ooey gooey romance. Go for it. Uh, if you're an artist, if you're a creative person, this is a great time to work on creative or artistic projects to brainstorm. Pisces is really good at making connections between all kinds of things. So that's part of what makes creativity go is when we make connections with things you wouldn't expect. So Venus is going to be really skilled at that for all of January. And then we get our first benefic enclosure of the moon. So I was talking about one earlier for the New Year's Eve, kind of womp womp, not a great forecast. Uh, Now here we're going to have a happy version, a supportive, helpful version where the moon is sandwiched in between nice things. And that's going to be on the 3rd. We're going to get the moon in between the rays of Venus and Jupiter. And so that, the exact times, if you are in Universal Standard Time, Greenwich Man Time, that is going to be on January 3rd from 4:20 p.m. until January 4th at 1:33 p.m. If you are in Central Time, the benefic, nice little pocket of weather here on the 3rd. So if I'm going to be doing stuff, sending emails, having meetings, I might do it on the 3rd between 10:20 in the morning until 7:33 in the morning on the 4th. So that's a nice little pocket. And then we're going to get, oh, did I miss a mind your own business day? And let me elaborate on the mind your own business days because I also have a pretty like, I'm pretty staunch in my astrology of trying so hard to not tell you how to feel. Like I can tell you it's going to rain. That doesn't mean you're going to be sad. You might love the rain. I don't know. Maybe you're like, maybe that's like your sport needs rain or you're a farmer. I don't know. At the same time, like how I use astrology for myself is if I see like a mind your own business day when the moon is not in a great place. So like, I don't love the 6th. The 6th looks just okay, and the 7th. Um, but how I treat this is sometimes you can't mind your own business. Sometimes you have to go to work. Sometimes you have families. And so this is just my keyword, my cute little phrase that tells you to exercise caution on the mind your own business days. If you have to communicate, do it carefully. If you see other people acting up, you know why, and you can have patience or act more skillfully because you know, well, this might be over in a day and that might change how you handle it. Um, and if you can mind your own business, you could avoid, like this is not when I would go to the grocery store. It's going to be busy, intense, crunchy. I'm going to have to adjust and pivot myself a lot just to get through it and be really like patient, especially on the 6th, we're going to have Mars changing signs, but then the moon in a Mars ruled sign. So Mars is action. I want to go forward. Uh, so mind your own business day on the 6th. Use that information however it is helpful for you. It doesn't mean that like, oh, it's going to be a horrible day and don't do anything, but yeah, exercise caution. On the 6th of January, we're going to have Mars returning back into Cancer. So with any retrograde planet, there is a reviewing that's happening. That planet is literally returning to places in the sky they have already been, to degrees in your chart that they've already been. So think back to what was that? What would that have been? September, October, November, even a little bit, because Mars first had to retrace its steps in Leo before getting to Cancer. Think back to what you were up to September, October, November of 2024. We may be coming back to some of those topics. For me, this is exactly fit my going back to the gym in September, October, getting up some momentum, hurting myself, hurting my back in November, stopping. And then as this is happening, I'm about ready to go back to the gym. I'm about ready to return back to my 6th. It's in my 6th house as well. So it's like, it's about my upkeep of my health. It's about injury and inflammation. And I'm going back to some things that I was definitely up to in September, October. Albeit doing them differently. I'm doing different exercises than I was when I was at the gym back then. I'm gonna have to be acting different and more careful at the gym. So, yeah, what are you gonna be reviewing? That's the question, one of them at least. I'm gonna actually say to maybe go check out my 2025 overview. I want to take some time to just explain like the fact that, okay, we've got to understand that a planet rules a place. And when Mars is in Cancer, they are really under the auspices of the moon. That was not a very nice moon. They're under the auspices of the moon, and the moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So Mars experience, Mars is resourcing, how Mars is getting counsel and guidance from the moon. That counsel and guidance, that way of doing things and acting is changing every 2.5 days. And so, again, I talk about it much more. It's time stamped 2025 overview. I spend a lot of time talking about how to handle that. Go check that out. I'll be talking about it a lot more next month as well. But, especially with adrenaline, if you feel like really reactive, and this is kind of like the worst case scenario with it, I don't expect everyone to just become reactive. Or if you have Mars in Cancer, I'm not saying you are reactive. Especially natal charts. You've had your whole life to work on whatever. Uh, I don't have this natally. So when it shows up in the weather, I'm like, how do I hold this? But worst case scenario, if there is a lot of feelings, a lot of like wanting to jump into action, do the Mars thing, um, taking 15 minutes, taking 20 minutes, that might be what it takes to wield that Mars as skillfully as possible in a place where it's really not supported. Like it's not Mars's fault they're not supported to be like uber Mars here. Um, but two, if you have Mars retrograde, threat level red goes to a threat level yellow. This might be a fine time for you. You might not be noticing as much, but and usually I might be a little bit less concerned about it, but with the opposition with Pluto, it's just supercharging all of this. It's amplifying things. Yeah, it's tough for Mars to be getting that oppositional energy, uh, kind of putting things in Mars's way that it maybe doesn't have any control over with Pluto. That sense of control, empowerment versus disempowerment, not being in control or having agency. So anywhere, I guess last thing I'll mention, agency, doing agency differently, doing assertiveness differently. Uh, these are, again, also things I cover in the other video. Go check it out. But it's it's changing on the 6th. Vibe shift on the 6th. Oh, is there anything else I need to say about that? No. On the 8th, we are going to have Mercury entering into Capricorn. And this is also like the first time in a good 2 months that Mercury has had a bit of dignity, like a reasonable amount of dignity. At this point, they are visible, they're moving direct. And in this first little bit of Capricorn, we can also see that Mercury is in their own bound. And they will be in their own bound until January 13th. So there's this nice kind of, and I know Mercury is like more toward the middle of the month. They're going to be going under the beams. And so communications might get quieter or harder to come by. But overall, like January 8th through January 13th looks like a good time to do Mercury things, plan, have conversations, send packages, buy, sell, do those mercurial exchanges, travel plans or actual traveling might be might go a little bit more smoothly between the 8th and 13th. This is when I'm going to be making an appointment with my tax person and get that ball rolling. Mercury rules my 8th house of taxes. So that's how I'm going to be using that little window of Mercury being more functional, being in its own bound. Um, let's see. Yeah. Yep. That's what I have to say about Mercury. Let me check on this chat. See if there's any questions. Oh, Caroline, you're from, so hopefully I'm saying your name right. Caroline. Albuquerque, Albuquerque. Yeah, rain is a special occasion. So if I'm gonna be like, that example. It wouldn't be just like, oh, there's bad weather. I'm sad. It's not bad weather. All right, I've got a question. If one's Lord of the Year is Venus and Venus is exalted in Pisces, does that mean that during that time it's the most positive time during that year? Potentially. Yeah, that could be a nice time for you, especially if you're a night chart, and Venus is, um, then even better of a planet for you, then yeah. So anytime, if these terminologies are uh, unfamiliar, if you've never heard of like Lord of the Year, profections, anything like that, that's okay. You can totally ignore this. If, however, you do know what annual profections are or time lords, then the main thing to know is just if any planet is your time lord, you're going to want to watch their transits more closely for the whole year from birthday to birthday. And if you have like, so if Venus is your time lord for the year, we want to watch Venus's transits. We also want to watch transits to your natal Venus. So wherever Venus is in your birth chart, watching whatever transits happen by any aspects or conjunction with them. And again, short answer, louder, more apparent. Be like, oh yeah, there's stuff happening that is aligning with that. So yeah, I hope it's a really good time. Um, all right, any other questions? Yeah, and I try not to, uh, you know, call anyone out that they've seen me. But if you're willing to say it, yes, I love it. I do remember. I try to remember people's names, or I'll get like that little spidey sense, like I know them from somewhere. Um, yeah, Lisa's bringing up a really great point with Mars and Cancer. And this is something that I do like to note in the dignity conversation. And if you've heard me say this in the past, here it is again. They like being in a water sign. Mars rules a water sign. So that helps even more for us to understand how Mars can be okay in a water sign. Mars is on the nocturnal planet team. Cancer is a nocturnal sign. So nocturnal planets like to be in nocturnal signs. Daytime diurnal planets like Saturn and Jupiter like to be in daytime signs. So Saturn actually really loves to be in Aquarius, being in a daytime sign. It also has triplicity dignity, being in air. Mars has triplicity dignity being in water. So there are definitely, and this is where I was just hearing Austin Coppock say in a forecast that, a planet in fall is not strong. It's not that they're weak necessarily. It's more that there is an incongruence between qualities, between what Mars needs and what's around, and how it navigates that space that really isn't set up for them. Which I think a lot of us living in this society can relate to that experience. But yeah, strength, functionality, it's a nuanced discussion when a planet is in fall. So thank you for bringing that up. It's not as simple as, oh, a planet is in fall, everything is the worst and nothing's going to work. And people who have planets in fall in their birth chart know that it is a more of a nuanced discussion. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Lisa. All right. What else is important? The node shifting. So we have had for the better part of the last year and a half the lunar nodes in Aries and Libra. In January, we're going to be having them change signs for the first time in a year and a half. So really since the middle of 2023, we've had them across, working with house topics, life topics in the Libra Aries part of your charts. Now the nodes are going to be moving into Virgo Pisces, and that tilling up of the soil that the eclipses do, that focus that really the eclipses draw, is going to be moving into the house life topics associated with Virgo and Pisces for everyone. Now, there's two ways to calculate this. I don't, I, I don't care that much. Like, I think I have my stuff set to like true, to the true node, but I don't know. I think I had it set to the mean for a long time. It is kind of it's every year and a half. It matters because it's going to give us this date where it shifts allegedly. Now, I'm going to put a link here in the chat of my favorite explanation of the difference between the true and mean nodes. The drunk history too long didn't read version is that the true node is wherever the lunar nodes are, their location in space or time or whatever, calculated at any given moment. Exactly. The mean node is an average of positions taken over a certain period of time and accounts or it tries to average a lot of this wobbling that happens with the lunar nodes. They wobble around a lot, and it has to do with the gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth as the moon moves around the Earth. There's a lot of wobbling that happens. And so the true node tries to get exactly and notice all these wobbles and tell us exactly where it is in these wobbles. The mean node tries to just smooth it out and give you an average. So again, the dates on that. The true node changes on the 11th of January. The mean node is changing on the 29th, whichever one you use. There you go. Typo alert, typo alert. If you've gotten a reading with me, I'm not going to catch everyone. I've been saying the 17th. I realized I was wrong. I've been saying January 17th for like all year. And I think my brain like swapped a one for a seven, like sound alike, look alike kind of things. Um, yeah, so I don't know. Anyway, clearing that up right now. It's not the 17th. It's the 11th through the 29th. It's January though. That's when they're changing. And so the good thing to know first is we have one left in Aries, but overall, these life topics associated with Libra and Aries in 2025, they should start to like settle down. They should start to, the dust should settle. Shouldn't be all these big eclipsey type of happenings in those places. One caveat is March because we do have our last Aries eclipse, but overall, we are getting the nodes out of there. And what is going to see more action then is Pisces and Virgo and the house topics there. So I'm just using myself as an example a lot today, which I don't usually, but I've just had a lot of like very vivid examples. So for instance, I'm an Aquarius rising, and I've already noticed what this is up to. I've got the South Node, uh, it has a lessening influence. The South Node is moving into my eighth of debt. And I just paid off my first student loan debt lender, the smallest one. It took me 15 years to do the tiny, ittiest, bittiest one. I'll never pay off the bigger ones. But I did pay off one of them, and now I have less debt. So it's like literally lessening of that. And now I have more money to like put into myself, to support myself, to invest in myself. And I've already allocated that money every single month. It's all going to healthcare. It's all going to take care of myself in ways I haven't been able to. So I am definitely seeing that increase of the North Node, decrease of the South Node. Look at the house topics that are in Pisces and Virgo, and just look at that very basic Hellenistic idea of less, lessening, more, or increase with the nodes. And the kind of metaphor I have about tilling up the soil. That I like to say because it reflects how the nodes are not peaceful beings. If we're going more from that Vedic tradition, I love this story of the hungry dragon, Kate or Rahu, the disembodied head of a dragon that's insatiable and just nom 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 nom. It's not super stable. It's not stable. And so similarly to how tilling up the soil is also not stable. We're really tearing things up. But in order to rebalance the soil, to bring balance back to it, to get rid of things like weeds that we don't want, to till up the soil so that we can put nutrients into it. And then after the nodes leave, or even heck, maybe when they're still in there, we're also planting seeds into the soil that's now been prepared. So it doesn't have to be like this kind of chaos or turmoil. I mean, yeah, that's tough, but there can be some constructive outcomes with it. So good luck, everyone, for the next year and a half. The nodes will be in this axis until, did I put? I did. No, I didn't. It's a year and a half. So till mid 2026, all of 2025, first half of 2026. That's about when the nodes are going to be in Virgo Pisces. So the next thing I want to talk about, on the 12th of January, we're going to have our second Mars Neptune trine. Let's see if I can find it exactly. And we had our first of these in October of 2024, on October 28th. The middle one of these three is on the 12th, and the last one is April 19th. And it's interesting because Mars is having this relationship with Pluto. At the same time, it's having this relationship with Neptune. So we've got these three Mars-Pluto peaks that happen October, beginning of January, end of April. We also have these three Mars-Neptune trines that are again, and that was mid-October, January, April. So this could be shenanigans. It's not, I mean, this could, I guess at best, it could be really powerful, inspired action, but it depends on what you're inspired by. That is the $1 million question of how the favorability of how this could turn out is like, what are you inspired by exactly in those actions? But a peaking of intensity of potential confusion, increasing intensity of like feeling really inspired, wanting to act, but maybe feeling really frustrated that you're not able to in the ways that you want. Being Pluto is sending that oppositional ray. So yeah, keep an eye on things, on yourself, take care of yourself during these times. And I would just say again, like, even if it's frustrating, especially if there is just good advice without astrology, if there's confusion, go slower. You know, if there's fog, you don't just start running and barreling into it. Go slower. Okay. What else do I need to say? Nothing. Nothing about that. And we've made it to our first full moon in Cancer. Definitely what I would categorize as another mind your own business day. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, take it easy. The moon is peaking in its cycle here, full brightness, shining the light right on this Mars and Pluto stuff. That, you know, moon is thankfully very well supported here. They've got Venus and Saturn looking down on them saying, hey, buddy, pump the brakes on that response. So that's really helpful. So it's not totally like a full moon that I think is going to be wild for everyone, because we've got some potentially constructive influences of restraint here. There could be some breakthroughs. Uranus is sextile to the moon here and the sun, in a trine with the sun. So we could be having on this full moon, I mean, it could be some realizations, it could be some kind of insight, or maybe some disruption happens or an interruption happens that really shines the light on something that needs to be seen. But anytime I see Uranus throwing its rays of disruption into something, but in like a positive way, it's like, oh, it needed to be interrupted. Interruptions could be helpful if there is a lot of steam to let off. Interrupting that flow of whatever to let steam off would be a really constructive thing to do here. The last aspect, so right before the new moon, coming off of Uranus, Chiron, and Saturn. So coming off of disruption, maybe seeing something difficult with Chiron or something painful, maybe a soft boundary or a soft no to something or a soft rejection. The aspect after the full moon is Mars. So it could be, you know, some kind of Marshall wanting to cut, wanting to separate, or just wanting to act. Like it could be something that happens and then like you have to spring forth into action. That happens all the time. Sometimes I'm cooking and I totally lose track of something because I get ADHD brain, and then I have to spring into action to put butter on the toast before the toast gets cold. Like, that's a very boring example. But it's viewed by at least one of the benefics here. So, that is of some assistance, and that helps to give us some support, I think. It's in the third decan, this last part of Cancer that is ruled by Jupiter, which also helps to soften things a little bit. Or sorry, it's the moon. I take it back. But it's in the Jupiter bound. The moon decan, the Jupiter bound. The moon is in there. So that also is going to help soften things a little bit, I think. And the sun is in the bound of Saturn, so that also adds some restraint to things. So again, like, I don't know, on the face of it, is it a mind your own business day? Yes. Is it the worst version? It could be worse. It could be worse. At this point, too, we're getting into our first really important adherence of the month. Adherence is when a planet is applying within 3 degrees, and it is a really strong. It's when that aspect is starting to be at basically full strength that will just keep increasing until the most strength that that aspect will have, that conjunction here will have at partile at exact conjunction. But this is when it starts heating up on the 13th of January, and that is going to perfect on the 15th. So the 13th to the 15th, Mars is going to be pretty loud here. Oh my gosh, actually, no, I'm thinking of, sorry. The moon is only going to be applying to Mars for a few hours. It's this adherence with the sun, my bad. So sun is applying to Mars. And so that is the thing that's going to make the Mars weather a bit loud here from the 13th to the 15th. We're going to see it big on the 13th because we have the full moon. So take care, again, I've said it before, take care of yourself extra on the 13th, 14th, 15th of January. Right in the middle of that, very kind of tense or again, like if you just have a lot of work to plow through, like this can be that like energy to move mountains. So that can be really helpful. But right in between this, Mercury is going to start to disappear from the evening sky. They're going to be getting really close to the sun, and we're going to not be able to see them in the morning anymore. So then words become hidden. Ideas, plans become hidden. So it's like something's happening, and then Mercury is like maybe planning on it or thinking about it a lot, but they're not coming out and saying it directly. So we're going to have to wait until they get on the other side of that and pop out in the evening, which I guess I did not write down when that's going to be. Oh, roughly March. So, yeah, more like March. So Mercury is going to be hidden under the beams for a while. So we may not see the full outcome of whatever this full moon is about for a while. Some of the things might come out a little later. Not to like make anyone paranoid, but I do see that. Now on the 15th, we get some of this Mars Sun stuff calming down. The moon has moved away from Mars. And on the 15th, we are going to have a little benefic enclosure. And that is going to be at 6:58 in the morning on the 15th of January, Universal Standard Time, Greenwich Man Time, until, what is that, 3:32 in the afternoon on the 17th. So it's like a 2-day long benefic enclosure of the moon. The moon is going to be leaving a sextile with Jupiter and moving into another aspect with Jupiter. So that's actually going to happen a couple times this month. Here we go. So the moon is going to have a sextile with Jupiter, and then they're going to be moving into Virgo, and they will square Jupiter. And so that whole chunk of time, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, if you are in Central Time, that's going to be at 12:58 in the morning, really wee hours on the 15th to early morning, 9:32, less than that early, 9:32 in the morning, early for me, 9:32 in the morning on the 17th, if you're Central Time. So all day 15th, 16th. And then Mars Sun opposition. Now, this is an interesting point in Mars's cycle too, because it is a bit of a middle point that began when Mars and Sun were conjunct, and that was like in 2023. It was November of 2023. That was when this Mars Sun cycle got kicking off here. So if you can think back, I know it's kind of hard on the spot, but maybe you can do some research and see what you were doing back on November 17th of 2023. We had this Mars Cazimi Sun. And now, the 15th of January, we're coming to the middle point. Now, Mars is a planet of conflict. So in that story arc, maybe it's about conflict. Maybe it's about self-assertion. Maybe it's a story arc about where you're putting your energy or your effort. Maybe this is the middle of a Mars story arc that has to do with your Mars ruled places like Aries and Scorpio. So check out what was going on in November of 2023. See how we might be at the middle point of something there, and then know that we still got half of the cycle left of Mars to move through this other half of the sky to complete that cycle. All right. I'm going to skip. There's a little, it's like 18 hours. So I guess it's a day. On the 17th, there's a malefic enclosure of the moon. So we get, and I think if we see a few of these like malefic, benefic enclosures of the moon, right, like in a row, it can speak to this kind of roller coaster of energy of like, okay, some difficulty and then some ease. So maybe some difficult or some ease on the 15th, 16th, 17th. So 15th, 16th, 17th might have this more easeful note to it. But then on the 17th, we're getting a bit of a difficult note again. So that is going to be, let's see. Oh my goodness. Universal time. That's going to be at the very end of the day at 11:43 p.m. on the 17th until 5:52 p.m. on the 18th. And Central Time on the 17th, the difficult patch starts at 5:43 p.m. on the 17th and lasts until 11:52 a.m. on the 18th. So maybe wait until after lunch on the 18th to be doing your important stuff. Unless, of course, I don't know, I'm finding more and more and more malefic enclosures of the moon. Yes, can they be crummy? Yes, can they be uncomfortable? But also, if you're just doing Mars Saturn stuff, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm gonna go do this workout that really sucks. Like, yes. For me, on the 17th, I'm gonna be going off onto a meditation retreat for 3 days, which is probably gonna be pretty uncomfortable because I'm not gonna have any of my creature comforts for the first for the first time in a minute. So yeah, it makes sense. It fits. Then on the 18th, we have the sun entering into its 3 degrees, applying to Pluto. So getting into an adherence with Pluto. So some intensity here with the sun and Pluto on the 18th. That's going to perfect on the 20th. And so really that intensity kind of dropping off a bit with the sun just in time for Mercury to come pass through. So then as soon as the sun is done making its pass over Pluto, then Mercury is going to make their pass over Pluto. So really, I mean, mid-January through until the end of January, there's some Pluto signatures. So when the sun and Mercury are moving over Pluto, this is where our focus, our mind can really get stuck on stuff, for better or for worse. It's a great time to investigate. It's a great time to introspect. Just bring snacks, if you notice you're really getting really focused on something. That, again, it really depends on the context. You can use that to help you do a research project. You can use that to get through a bunch of work you need to get through. You can also use that to introspect in a really deep, powerful way. At the same time, if you notice yourself getting hooked or caught on something that's upsetting, something that's traumatic, something that is not helping, not making you feel safe or good or whatever, then it might be a time to pull back and realize, oh, I'm really focusing on stuff really hard to let it go. My mind keeps coming back to it over and over. And with Pluto, it is that process of letting go over and over and over and over again. So yeah, we might be dealing with that last half of January a little bit, that Plutonian energy, but it's also could be really transformative. Again, powering through something as well. So in a constructive way. Yeah, so Sun and Mercury also clearly entering into Aquarius during this time as well. Moving it a little back here. So we're going to have Sun in adherence with Pluto. Then on the 18th, I guess one other thing that's going on is the Venus-Saturn conjunction. So as Venus enters into Pisces and is moving through Pisces, they're going to be getting ever closer to Saturn. So with our relationships, it's interesting because in Pisces, there can definitely be some beer goggles on. There can be some rose-colored glasses. With Saturn coming more and more into view, it's like the beer goggles come off. The rose-colored glasses come off, and we can see things really clearly, really starkly. The illusion is disillusioned. And that can be a difficult process, but it also, I mean, would we rather be misunderstanding, not clear, or would we rather know? Or would we rather be clear? I think most of us would say we would rather be clear on that, and that's what Saturn can do. Uh, Now, this is almost like a spectrum of things, like at best rose-colored or at most rose-colored glasses on this end, and then we can get the clarity of Saturn. But then Saturn itself, especially when it's with Neptune, can really get into this place of pessimism, hypercritical, kind of like the critical nature of Saturn has no bounds. So if, it's like, be careful with that. If you notice yourself dipping into anything that's moving away from realism on either side, pessimism or optimism, rose-colored glasses or everything shit, that is your note that Pisces Neptune might be a bit at play here. But the most intense moments of this are going to be on the 18th of January, and then there's two in April. So this is actually kind of a story that, whatever comes up mid-January with relationships, fairness, justice, art, beauty, aesthetic, whatever you're doing there, it might come up again in April for some reason, on the 7th especially of April and the 24th of April, 2025. So start noting things now, make little notey notes in your journal about what's going on with your Venus things and see how that goes. Then Sun's going to enter Aquarius. So the Sun is going from one Saturn ruled place to another Saturn ruled place. But this time it's more externalizing. It's like, here are the rules, and I'm going to talk about them because this place still loves rules. Like Aquarius, I know we think like Uranus and wild, crazy, revolutionary, but I always say this, and I think this is another osteotopicism. The revolutionary has to be very stubborn intellectually. Think about Luigi. Was anyone going to change his mind? I don't think so. I wasn't going to change his mind. Like, I didn't have that power. When people get into Aquarian fixed mind, takes one to know one, it's me. I'm projecting. But that's one of the possibilities here. So it's not that they don't love rules, but they like their own rules. And they're not those rules, not those old ones. I'm gonna take this one out and replace it with one that's better. That makes more sense. Optimize it. Do it differently. But it's not a free-for-all here. It's not Pisces. It's not Aries. These are the wild children, I think. Quite a bit more. And that is where the Sun is going. So, themes of rejection with Saturn, always. Themes of inside and outside of the boundary of things. It's like, cool, I'm in society and I have roads. Oh, screw your roads. I'm gonna go out here. I don't need your roads. I'm gonna live my own life. So but also that takes a lot of discipline. There's a ton of responsibility required. The more free you are, the more responsibility you have almost for yourself. So yeah, that's the thing. So if you're finding yourself getting mentally really stuck on something now mentally with air, Pluto, the sun, experiencing just this very mental place. And as Mercury inches closer, it's going to increasingly just be mental, verbal, um, thinking, thinking many thoughts. Um, Sun Pluto conjunction on the 20th. Exactly. And then after that, so more on like the 22nd, 23rd, Sun is going to move away again, just in time for Mercury to continue that Plutonian process, but now maybe talking about it more, planning around it more, um, doing the kind of, I think Mercury really helps us integrate things. It is the psychopomp. They can go above and below worlds, Mercury. And so maybe whatever the sun is really realizing or really focused on, then when Mercury comes in, they can help us to integrate, navigate whatever those realizations were at the end of January. And I have a few more things, but somehow wrapping this up. Let me see if anyone has any questions. Oh, sure, what the heck. Someone asked if I could, someone threw out a request. Can you please put into Pisces, Virgo rising perspective the nodal shift? I mean, yeah, then the house topics that we're working with. And so this is an example that everyone can do, no matter what your rising sign is. I'll just illustrate. Whoops, that's not what I want. I can just illustrate how to synthesize some of this stuff here. That's funny. I must have my calculation must be on the mean. I must have left it on the mean node. Okay, close enough. You can use your imagination. Uh, so decrease of first house stuff, lessening of first house focus, increase in seventh house focus. So what's going to be shifting in balance there? What's going to be changing and having changes happen over the year and a half is the balance between you and the other. Something about you, something about your partnerships in life or how you are with the other. It could be an increase in focus of others. So make sure, with the South Node, I think some people get a little too extreme thinking about decrease or lessening, and they say, do I need to ignore myself all year if I'm a Virgo rising or ignore myself for a year and a half, abandon myself? No, please do not do that. Do not abandon yourself. Do not forget yourself. But what is the bare minimum you got to do for you, Virgo rising, so that you can have enough bandwidth to deal with all of whatever's going on over here with other people? So it's like you got to do the bare minimum here, and like that can be hard sometimes, but that is how you do that, in my opinion. It's you don't do the South Node, and the South Node can help us let go of things. So if there's ways of being, parts of your wardrobe, maybe you've had bangs you want to grow out, or maybe you want bangs, but letting go of a part of yourself or letting go of something about yourself that you don't want anymore, that is outdated or doesn't work anymore. Um, it can be anything, and it can be really like cleaning out a garden and then making sure that that north node in the seventh isn't getting to be too much, too complex and confusing and unwieldy. And then, so it's all of those buzzwords change the life topics. For me, I gave my money example across the second and the eighth. So you can flip it and reverse it and do it for Pisces rising. But yeah, it's really about knowing what houses we have, and so that's why it's kind of a difficult thing if you don't know your exact birth time. And this is where I refer people out to a rectifying astrologer like Patrick Watson, Catherine Urban, Cameron Cassidy. They all do rectification, and that can help you reverse engineer your birth time so that you can know what houses we're dealing with, so you can know what life topics we're dealing with for you personally. Um, so that's why knowing your birth time is so helpful. I do work with a little bit of planetary remediation in a kind of a basic way. I did take a class from, or I took Austin Kopic's class on the proper care and feeding of a birth chart, which was my orientation to remediation. I am no Vedic astrologer. Like, if you need like serious remediation, then I would send you to like a Nate Craddock of Soul Friend Astrology. Um, or like, I think Austin Kopic on his website, he has some Vedic astrology, some students of his that, or some other people of Vedic origin that can do some really serious remediatory work. I've done that myself. That's like the industrial strength grade. But, you know, like let's say you're doing Western astrology and you've got a really, really strong Mars. I can tell you how to deal with that a little bit in from like a more Western astrology perspective. It depends on what you need. But yeah, I do basic remediation. Um, you know, or like if you have big, strong Mars, give to a charity that helps veterans, you know, for example. That's one example. If you need help with Saturn, we can give to a charity that deals with people who don't have homes. Um, that's just one avenue. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you everyone for the great questions and the congratulations on my less debt. Man, it's so awesome. It's been such a long road. Yeah, as someone who is dating a Libra, seventh house, I am an Aries rising. I am also very excited for the notes to get out of there. It has been a hell of a year and a half. Oh my gosh, someone is having some kind of full moon experience. Yeah, a break. That sounds like a breakthrough. That sounds like a, yeah, that's beautiful. Someone's going to be starting a therapy for themselves. That's really going to hopefully be helpful. Amazing. Yeah, and sometimes full moons are a culmination of effort, especially with Mars there. It's like all this effort that maybe even like seeing it paired with that, the middle of the Mars cycle, it's kind of like maybe all the effort that's been put in since November of 2023 that now is culminating or peaking, or even like from 6 months ago, you know, from the new moon in Cancer that was there 6 months ago. What efforts have really fruited and culminated and now are coming to their fruition in this full moon on the 13th. All right, Angela has a question. I have a question about the Mars cycle. What does it mean, the midpoint? Uh, yeah, so every planet here, all the visible planets have this cycle with the sun called the synodic cycle. And Mercury and Venus have kind of one way that they do a dance with the sun, and they kind of seem to go back and forth, you know, on one side of the sun or the other. The slower moving visible planets like Jupiter and Mars, they have a relationship with the sun where they meet the sun by body and have a conjunction, and then they go around, or I should say the sun moves around, but they come into an opposition, which is not going to happen with, you know, Mercury or Venus's synodic cycle because they don't get far away enough from the sun. But they'll get opposite. Jupiter and Mars will both get opposite the sun at some point, and then they'll come back around and join it again. And so the sun moves around a couple times for Mars' cycle. And so Mars' cycle with their synodic cycle lasts about 2 years. It takes that much time for them to have their rebirth, the culmination, and the next rebirth. And if you can identify, say, what house topics are ruled by Mars, then you can follow those life topics in that 2 year long story of Mars, similar to how we do every single month with the moon. You know, we can look at the moon's progress every month. It grows in light and then it wanes in light. Mars does the same thing. So does Jupiter. So not exactly the same astronomically, but symbolically, we kind of get that conjunction, opposition, conjunction, opposition, and it creates this story, this kind of story arc. So hopefully that helps. And then Urshka here mentions Freedom Cole. That's who Austin Coppock learned Vedic astrology from, or Indian astrology. Jyotish. Y'all, I am an Aqua. I am an Aquarius rising. I am a Capricorn sun. So don't worry. I am This is Saturn-tastic. Yeah. Hey, y'all. You're so nice. Thanks, everyone. We all like to be correctly identified in astrology land. Someone put a really cute, I don't know who it was, so I apologize if this was you and you're listening somehow, but they had this really cute post on Threads where they wanted to like call in astrologers to them, like, I would love to connect with astrologers on Threads. And then they asked like for us like a specific question about where's your Mercury and where's their ruler or whatever, what's in your eighth. It was like such a good, thoughtful question about a chart. And I was like, that's how you do it. Like, ask an astrologer or an astrology enthusiast to talk about their chart. That is like flies to honey, a moth to a flame. We cannot avoid it. I love talking about myself. It's kind of a faux pas to just like, sometimes to just be like, my chart stuff, but it's really hard not to. It's so hard not to. Yeah, Pluto and the first, and you know what? I don't care. Like at this point, I know I'm gonna regret saying that. Don't hurt me, bro. But Pluto has already been over my chart ruler, my sun, my Mercury. It's like, yeah, do another one. Cool. Then after that, it'll go on to my moon in Pisces. It's like I am not like this whole dumb life is just Pluto-tastic for me. Um, I'm really excited for Pluto to leave Capricorn. I am so ready for Pluto to not be co-present my Sun and Mercury. I would love for Pluto to GTF out. I am going into a fresh hell and leaving a stale one behind, and I am totally happy with that. Yeah, Saturn-tastic is also one of my favorite words. Yeah, I love it. Yay. I'm a day chart. I have Saturn privilege because I'm a day chart, so it's not that bad. Okay, so last few things, and then I have to get ready to do my job, my other job, which is seeing clients, which is very exciting. Okay, so like not as much astrology, the 20th of January through the 25th, 26th, we're just kind of dealing with Sun moving away from Pluto and Mercury coming into Pluto. Mercury is going to meet Pluto by the 29th, but it really starts to get cooking on the 26th. So put a note in your calendar, especially like January 26th through the 29th, to, pack snacks before you make tracks. Animal Crossing reference. Uh, if you notice yourself getting really focused on stuff, just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, or that if what is being focused on by the mind, if it's disturbing, to get help with that. Pluto it can bring up, realizing with the Sun and Mercury with Pluto, it can bring up realizing things, seeing patterns potentially that have been there for a while. It gives us some time to try to work through those and untangle them. But again, if it's more advanced stuff, make sure that you're getting the support that you need 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th of January, if it's even a problem. If you need to power through stuff, use the 26th through the 29th to do that. And then Mercury is entering into Aquarius on the 27th, meeting up with Pluto, of course. Mercury does really well in air signs. They have some dignity in air signs. They do also have some bound rulership as soon as they get in here. So Mercury is going to be with Pluto, but also they're going to be able to use their brain power to work through whatever Pluto is doing. And they will be in their own bound until February 1st. So, January 27th to February 1st, we get another little nice Mercury window where, yes, they are under the beams. Yes, they are with Pluto. So that's like, there might be some more internal stuff happening. But again, if you need to like do some math, plan a thing, send a package, buy or sell, when Mercury is in their own bound there, they get some protection from the sun, even just a little bit. So it can be a nice little pocket to get through some Mercury planning, cognitive labor if you need to, those last few days of the month. Communications with Mercury, again, maybe when they're in their bound, it's going a little better, but they're still invisible in the sky. Having communications or plans culminate, come to fruition, might be on the more subtle level. Or, you might not be getting that letter in the mail, or they might not be quite as fast. Then we have really short malefic enclosure uh, of the moon. And that's going to be on the 27th and the 28th, depending on where you are. Right. What did I say? Yeah, I missed that. The 27th and the 28th. So that's going to be from 16 degrees of Capricorn until 21 degrees of Capricorn. Universal time, that is, oh gosh, 20:32. Oh, it's 10. That's 10:32 p.m. on the 27th until 4:52 in the morning on the 28th. So just an 8-hour one. So yeah, I guess if you're like in Europe and Africa, you might sleep through this malefic enclosure. That's I always love when I sleep through bad astrology weather. You might be asleep for that one. If you're more in the global west time zones, that's going to be 2:32 p.m. on the 27th until 10:52 p.m. on the 27th. So it's just not that great of an afternoon, evening on the 27th. Again, not the worst malefic enclosure, but yeah, not the best time to like plan the meeting or to hand in a thing if you need to. And then Venus, we'll talk about Venus and the Aquarius New Moon and Uranus, and then that's it. So on the 28th, Venus is going to be entering their pre-retrograde time. So pre-retrograde time, well, that's not what I wanted to do, is a time when that planet is starting to follow a path that they will eventually retrace. And they might return to some topics that are happening at that time. Uh, and so Venus is going to get to, did I put the degree? I don't think I did. On the 28th, and they're going to station on the 1st of March. So, I mean, essentially all of February is Venus's pre-retrograde shadow. I like to say time or phase because the word shadow is so loaded at this point. I'm kind of allergic to it because I'm an Aquarian, so I'm always going to be allergic to whatever becomes mainstream. But Venus does enter this pre-retrograde time end of January. It's going to be all of February. So start watching Venus stuff, not in a way that's like paranoid necessarily or like, oh my God, my relationships are going to fall apart, but just in more of a curious way of like what topics of relationship, beauty, art, romance, love, justice, fairness, harmony, aesthetic, what is coming up around those themes, and particularly looking at the Pisces ruled places. So for me, I'm going to be looking at, oh, and values. Venus is about what we value. Excuse me. Venus is about what we value. So for me, that works out very well being in my second house of money. It's like, what do I love that I want to spend money on? Maybe there's a process that's going to be happening in quarter 2 of this year. But yeah, look at the house topics. It could be about values as well. And so just starting in February to notice what is coming up. And then knowing that that retrograde Venus story kicks off on the 1st of March. They station direct on the 12th of April, and they leave the post-retrograde phase on the 14th of May. So this is like a whole ass story. And we saw that Venus doesn't get into Taurus until June. So this really helps us to see that whole trajectory starting in February. That'll lead us to June. Venus retrograde, things from the past coming back, aesthetics, things that you find fun, the things that you value, things that you enjoy that bring delight, Venus's delight and pleasure, anything from the past coming back. One time I had a Venus retrograde in my 12th house, and I found an old Game Boy in a closet in a hidden place in the basement. And I played Dr. Mario, that whole Venus retrograde. So it could be literally something you enjoy coming back from the past. It could, of course, be a relationship from the past, whether they are haunting you physically or in your dreams or wherever. Hashtag it's me. I'm talking about myself. Examining your values, examining these things and reconsidering them, reconsidering aesthetic, reconsidering relationships, reconsidering Venus stuff, reconsidering values, doing things differently and experimenting with all of these things. Values, beauty, art, relationships, pleasure, joy, new ways of doing that. Restructuring, moving through challenges. There could be challenges. There could be delays. Maybe you want to make an art project and you can't find the right kind of glue. Or maybe, you're trying different ways of communicating in your relationship or working through a difference in values in a relationship. That could be, and this is where I bring up the quote, yes, the vulnerability, the intimacy that is cultivated in problem solving together. So cultivating intimacy in relationship by moving through problems together. Yeah, there can be so many things. So inconsistency, difficulties, but also doing things differently, experimenting, re-examining, reconsidering, having things come back from the past, all about Venus. And look at those house topics, whatever they are for you. That's where you can expect them coming in more clearly. Now, Venus and Neptune, at the very end of January, Venus is going to be applying to Neptune. And so keeping our heads extra on a swivel, which Saturn will help us do, on the 1st of February is that first Venus-Neptune conjunction. There's 3 of them, end of March, beginning of May. So, okay, I hate to say it, but if you're dating out there, and I know from experience, if you are dating out there during this kind of weather, Venus and Neptune, it's not that we don't trust people. It's not that we're going to be paranoid, but it's like, yeah, we're going to keep them in the maybe pile until further notice. Or, maybe introduce them to your parents after May, because there can be illusions, deception. There can just be like so much heavy romanticism, like ooey gooey. This also feels like potential dopamine casino territory. Depending on what your Mercury and Sun are in charge of with Pluto, you could be getting obsessed with things that fall right in the line with Venus and Neptune being extra ooey gooey romantic. So if you are getting carried away with very fun, exciting dopamine new relationship energy, have fun with it. Don't do wild, crazy things that you wouldn't normally do. Don't get married in Vegas. That's the headline. At the end of January, into February, Venus is a little bit compromised. Now, I think, and this is, something that does come up, is that a Venus with Neptune or a Venus retrograde, maybe you meet this beautiful, awesome person, and maybe it is everything that it's cracked up to be. There still might be things that need to come out of the woodwork for a few months. So just, yeah, give it time to do that. We know Venus is going to go retrograde too. So that also, it changes the course of things, at least temporarily. And then we know that the second half of 2025, things start to work their way out. Yeah, that's what I've been telling everyone. Pretty much that little, like, okay, March is kind of wild and things settle down by June. That has been my elevator speech about transits to pretty much everyone in session for a while now. Because, yeah, a lot of these stories, whether it's Mars, Venus, like they're longer stories that take us through Q2, which is wild. All right. I already mentioned some things about Mercury on the 29th, meeting Pluto. Discursive thought, just thoughts on thoughts on thoughts on thoughts. It's already in an air sign. If you are getting any kind of help at the end of January with plant helpers or fungi friends, make sure you are of sound mind before any large adventures. This is like if I was going to go skiing, like this kind of weather feels like a black diamond a bit. If you're ready, if you're a good skier, do it. If you're safe, do it. If you still need some bunny hill practice, yeah, maybe just leave the plant allies out of this one. It depends on who you are. I'm not giving medical advice, but it is a powerful time at the end of the month to work with any ingrown patterns or investigate around patterns. uh, in whatever part of life's your Aquarius stuff is. For me, it's just myself. Uh, and then, this new moon in Aquarius that's happening right after. It's like all this Pluto stuff or work that we're doing. And then what is wrought out of that? Like, any realizations, thought, contemplation that's been helpful over the last week of January. That new moon in Aquarius almost speaks to like that realization helping us with a new start or helping to bring things to a close or end something that has been going on for a long time. Regrouping around things and seeing things with a fresh set of eyes. That might be this Pluto stuff leading us into an Aquarius new moon. The last aspect of this new moon in Aquarius is Pluto and Mercury. So that's what the moon is doing right before it meets the sun. And then after, their next aspect is going to be Jupiter trine. And that feels like such a, I don't know, such a ray of sunshine, I guess, or, if it's not that, because sometimes understandings can be really heavy and difficult. It could be that too, but there's understanding maybe. And especially with the retrograde nature of Jupiter, like really seeing things differently, especially if it's something from the past that's coming back around again. Man, I had to change my mind about a lot of people, places, and things during this Mercury-Jupiter weather across Sagittarius and Gemini, changing my understanding of a lot of things. And so, maybe this new moon just harkens to more of that, seeing things with a new perspective or a fresh set of eyes. So I like that trajectory of the moon moving away from Mercury, Pluto, moving toward Jupiter and Gemini, and by a trine. So it's a big part of this. I know that the ruler of this lunation cannot see it. There is no exaltation lord of Aquarius. Saturn is in aversion and cannot guide. But Mercury is here, Jupiter is here, and Jupiter can kind of what's the word? Arbitrate. They can help to connect Saturn with this lunation, kind of by a third middleman kind of way. So it's not a totally just isolated new moon or anything. It's a lot of the sky is connected to it, and it looks pretty constructive. I don't know. I feel okay about it. There's also a lunar enclosure of the moon, a benefic lunar enclosure of the moon right after this, after the new moon. So that also has kind of a positive vibe to it, or a more favorable type of vibe to it. The Aquarius new moon is not seen by either malefic. So that's, I guess Saturn can't see to help them and guide them, but also they're not bothering the planets in there. Mars can't see into Aquarius, so Mars is not, inflaming anything or being too fast. And I guess that's a note too, that whatever new moon, so we got a new moon in Capricorn and a new moon in Aquarius in January, or end of December into January. It's like the new beginnings are longer, they're slower, they're more of long game, long plan, long strategy types of new moons. It's not just a quick one-off project all the time with Capricorn, especially, but usually not with Aquarius either. It's usually a big, longer, more involved type of structure or commitment with a new moon there. It's in Venus's decan and bound, so that gives more of a creative, harmonizing kind of feel to this new moon. It might be about, we were just talking about Venus and values. Let me show you what I mean. I need my complicated wheel back. It's this little area, 9 degrees of Aquarius. We are in both the decan and bound of Venus. So there's going to be a Venusian little accent to this new moon. And so, whatever we are beginning at the end of January or wrapping up or bringing to a close, hopefully it's something aligned with what we value or in more alignment with what we value or leading us toward more connection or a new beginning or ending something in order to improve our relationships, um, coming more toward things that we find beautiful or aesthetically pleasing. So that could be the Venusian flair to this new moon, might make it a bit more relational. And then on the 29th into the 31st, we have a benefic enclosure of the moon. Again, just adding to more of a favorable kind of feel after the new moon. Very much more just like, it just seems like much less crunchy than the, it just seems a bit more easeful than the full moon. So if the full moon is kind of intense, that's okay. That's totally, that could be very natural and have a bunch of constructive different places that that intensity is going. Um, then seeing this new moon wrap up this lunation cycle in a way that seems more favorable or positive, then I feel more favorable and positive about how that full moon stuff is going to turn out. That looked a little bit challenging, at least a little bit challenging. So exact times for benefic lunar enclosure, nice little pocket of weather. That's going to be 3:08 p.m. Universal Standard Time on the 29th. The moon at 11 degrees of Aquarius, all the way to 11 degrees of, God, this was almost, no, just kidding. It was not that. It's about 30 degrees. It's about 50 hours. So that's a nice thing until January 31st at 5:51 p.m. Universal Standard Time. That's going to be Central Time, 9:08 a.m. So about 9 in the morning on the 29th until about noon on the 31st. So a little nice pocket there to do things, get things done. A lot of dust will have settled from Pluto. So I'm kind of looking forward to the 29th through the 31st of January. And the last thing I have to talk about here is Uranus's station. So they have been retrograde since September 1st of 2024. We also had an eclipse in September, for what it's worth, but Uranus has been just hanging out at 23 degrees of Taurus. So if you have any placements in your birth chart at like those last 10 degrees, especially around 23 degrees of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, or Scorpio, this Uranus stationing, where Uranus is just, they stop moving and they get really loud or apparent, especially for fixed sign people or people with fixed sign placements, this might be more important to you, or just like, it's in square in opposition to any of those fixed placements. So for those people, again, needing for more change, transformation, adjustment to move through whatever is changing or itchy or needing more independence or freedom. It might be kind of more of a difficulty in dealing with that need for freedom. If you are a cardinal person or have more mutable signs, then this loudness, I'm going to say, it's hitting you in more of a positive way potentially, like from trines and sextiles. And so some of that disruptive energy can, maybe it's a breakthrough, maybe it's an insight that really, interrupts things, but is constructive. But yeah, the fixed babies might be kind of if you're feeling like you need extra independence or to do extra changes during the end of January into February, yes, that would make sense. So they have been retrograde since September 1st and they are stationing direct. It's less about, for me, okay, I think modern astrologers are going to have a lot to say about outer planets being retrograde and like doing their stuff differently. I think they give it a lot of the same treatments that I give retrograde planets. But for me, the focus really is these stations. They seem the loudest to me. And they got to the 23rd degree on the 19th of December, and they will leave that 23rd degree on March 12th of 2025. Is that real? Is that a typo? Uno momento. Oh my God, that might be real. I don't think that was a typo. Yes. So Uranus is going to be at 20 in that 23 degree chunk for 2.5 months. So I guess the good news here is that if you've been already doing things differently with the Taurus life topics, so for this Gemini rising, if you've been doing things differently with your spiritual health practices or your mental health practices, uh, they might be coming in extra handy now. You might be noticing a lot of fruits of that change, of doing things differently with that area of your life. And hopefully now some of those insights or disruptions, there can be a sense of moving more forward with and integrating whatever those insights or dealing with whatever those interruptions were, much more in March. But if the sweater feels itchy in your life in general, yeah, you're on a stationing. And last thing I'll say, with Uranus stationing, if you are noticing more interruptions, disruptions, turmoil, technological snafus, hang in there till March, but just be as flexible as you possibly can be. It's going to require some more flexibility, again, especially for fixed sign people. Okay, that is all of my notes. Let me see if there's any last minute questions. Last call, if anyone wants to throw any questions in here. I can't really answer specific birth charty things unless I see the whole chart. Mm, yes. Uh, Kiroki asks me how I interpret the nodes. I know I've covered this and I'm trying to think because I don't want to go over all of it now because we'll be here for a half hour. But I do have a whole primer that I give on this. I'm going to try to find where I've talked about this before and I will link it below after this. So just give me like a few hours, maybe a few days. Give me a couple days. I'm going to link past explanations to this, but there's the Hellenistic more or less increase, decrease. The North Node has not been trusted by Hellenistic astrologers since the beginning. Vedas Valens was like, when the moon is on the North Node, don't do anything. My mom didn't get the memo. She gave birth to me when the moon was on the North Node, and it does suck, and I don't like it. So I love the Vedic Indian astrology, Rahu Ketu, read the story of the dragon. They get their head chopped off and they turn immortal at the same time. And so they're just like this om nom 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 nom, like voracious, just completely unsatisfied place. The South Node, Ketu, more spiritual, less materially focused. In the material world, more spiritually focused, letting go of things. Asceticism, very South Node. Uh, the modern astrologers, they're the ones that bring in all the past, future, lifey stuff. I don't work with that as much because I don't even pretend to know about past and future lives. But I do think the nodes have a lot to do with balance. You got to balance those two areas, you know? So watch, notice what's increasing in Pisces, see what's wanting to be let go of or what's just going away, maybe even temporarily in Virgo over the next year and a half. Then you'll kind of see what they do. So now we've got another opportunity for a year and a half to see what they're going to do in a fresh part of our lives. Uh, yeah, I'll try to find some more info on that because it is a good conversation to have. But I need to get out in the sunshine before it sets. That's my real talk. Hello, Pisces rising, Aquarius sun. Oh, so you have a similar setup that I do. Little sun in the daytime, sun in the 12th. Ruled by Saturn of all people. I feel like not to dismiss, because every 12th house is a 12th house, but I always have wanted to do some kind of impossible study to look at like, you know, is having a Saturn ruled 12th house shittier? Not all the time. It's going to depend on the whole chart. Um, Let me see what other questions we have. Yes, welcome to the chaos. Welcome to the octagon. Yeah, Pluto, get out of Capricorn. Is Venus going to be a morning star after the retrograde? Yeah, I believe so. Let us look together. Let me share my screen. All right. So Venus Oh, they're gonna be retrograde in February. And I know they don't meet the sun for a long time. Like they don't meet the sun until Taurus. So we are still, okay, evening star Venus, and then they can join in March, and then morning star Venus, morning star Venus. So yes, after, well, during the retrograde, when they are retrograde, Venus will appear in the morning sky. So I will make that a little easier to see here if I back things up by a few hours. You can see this instance where if you, oh no, my disappearing pen. Okay, you have to imagine that this person is standing in the middle. That's a person. And we've got our horizon where that person is standing. And we have the sky above the head, right? So actually, let's just do this. Okay, sun below the horizon. Sun has not, and here I have it set to April 2025. The sun in this day has not risen yet, but Venus rises before. Venus rises in the east before the sun. They're still retrograde, but then eventually they're going to station direct, and then they're going to speed up and eventually meet the sun again going direct. But yeah, long story short, Venus is going to be in the morning sky after the retrograde. I guess, now I'm thinking about Venus being a morning star. And I would be remiss not to mention that Venus is way spicier as a morning star than they are as an evening star. And by spicier, I mean more outward, more direct, more assertive, more warrior queen Venus versus smooth operator, love, peace, romance, harmony Venus. Uh, Much more like I always, for time immemorium, since my, not since time immemorium, since the 80s, I have been really obsessed with Xena, warrior princess. And they are very warrior Venus coded. So that is what we see in a morning star. What's more is it's going to be an Aries Venus, which is also warrior queen Venus. So it's, once we get into 2025, we're going to start off with smooth operator Venus and Pisces, who wants to kind of make everything just smooth and feel cool and, Hakuna Matata. And we're going to get into warrior queen Venus later. And they're going to kind of go back and forth. So really good question. And it's always good to be looking at our planets in their morning star or evening star phases. Where are they in that cycle with the sun? Because it's gonna change how we interpret them. All right. What other questions? Excellent questions, everyone. Good morning from Australia. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's the future there. Okay, so we've got some fixed babies, some fixies who are also dealing with Uranus. I think you can start a relationship. Just keep an eye on it. I think I'm stealing this from Chris Brennan. I know he's mentioned it before. This is not my example, but he mentions the Obamas, um, Mr. and Mrs. Obama. They have Venus retrograde like all over their relationship. And so they're on a Venus clock. And so they can expect that the milestones, the big things are going to happen at certain important points in Venus's cycle. It doesn't have to be bad all the time at all. It works sometimes, but especially like Venus, any retrograde planet too. A way that I like to talk about Venus retrograde or any planet retrograde in session is not just the difficulties that we can have and things coming back from the past, but also being counterculture, being not mainstream. So if you start a relationship during a Venus retrograde, and maybe you're doing relationship differently than you've done it before. Maybe it's a second try with someone from the past. Maybe you are just trying to be different in a relationship or they are, or maybe it's like a non-mainstream relationship structure. that would all fit really beautifully with a Venus retrograde. So it's a really nuanced discussion. It's going to depend on your chart personally, because then another thing to consider is all of our charts are going to have Venus ruling different life topics. It's not like, well, yes, Venus is about relationship, beauty, values, blah, blah, blah. Venus for me rules my ninth house of long distance travel. Venus rules my ninth house of belief. Venus rules my fourth house of home. So when Venus is retrograde, it might not have anything to do with relationship. It might have to do with publishing or me rearranging my furniture. Um, so you got to look. So it might, I mean, Venus retrograde, I don't, it might not even be that relationally oriented for you this time around, depending on your birth chart. So I'm not going to tell people to like not date or you know like it's like totally screwed if you meet this beautiful person during a Venus retrograde. But just know that like that's a story that kind of weaves around until April, until May. So take that information for how you will. Uh, But yeah, thank you for getting us into that nuance, because I think when we bring up some of these more complex types of weather things that are coming through, uh, yeah, we want to navigate them as skillfully as possible. And I don't want people getting super worried about stuff, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, we need to watch things. My application got stuck on someone's desk for 3 weeks. We need to watch these things. And two, it could be like, oh my God, I'm trying to date. And why is every restaurant that I love closed? Why is my favorite thing never on the menu? It could be some of that kind of stuff coming into in the dating sphere. All right. And then, oh yeah, Anne Stevens says that Morningstar Venus is Lucifer, also known as the bringer of light. Because Lucifer means literally like light bringer or bright one or something like that. They all mean like they have actual meanings. Sorry, Sam. That's too many details that makes my brain break unless I put it on a visual screen and work with you on it. But thank you. And I do see 23-degree Taurus something or other. So yeah, like, you know, the Uranus stuff might be uh, creating a lot of change or experimentation or having to pivot around disruptions or work with disruptions in some area of life. Breakthroughs, insights. That's also Uranus, so you might be noticing some insights and breakthroughs. Um, Now, the thing about having insights and breakthroughs, I think a lot of the time, and maybe again, I'm projecting, but it's like usually when I have an insight or a breakthrough, something has to change in response to that. It's like, oh, shoot. Like, this thing is like this. I need to do something in response to that, lest I not be in alignment with my values. So some of this disruption and like insights and breakthroughs, like it's great, but yeah, it can be a little like that too. Um, oh my gosh, great questions, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions today and making it fun. It's fun when people are here live. And I still haven't decided what I'm going to do for my next rising sign horoscope for this month, but taking requests. Uh, Probably not moon centric. I did a moon one last month, so I might pick something else. I might pick on Venus. I think I might pick on Venus. And then www.aligninglightastrology.com for booking, for scheduling a session with me. I do natal chart, birth chart readings. I work with people on the time ahead if they want to look at the time in the future and how to navigate that. I work with people on a couples level, whether that is with a friend, a romantic partner, a business partner, any kind of relationship readings. I do that. So you can check all of that out on my website. And I also do tutoring. So if you are an astrology enthusiast, lover, enjoyer, if you really want to get serious or just want to understand something more deeply, you can have a tutoring session with me and I will walk you through anything that's challenging if it's like a Hellenistic technique. If it's modern stuff, no promises, but or medieval, maybe. It depends. Hellenistic, we got it going on. And then there is, speaking of Hellenistic astrology, the reading group for Chris Brennan's book that Melissa and I are up to continuously. We are meeting the second Saturday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. If you are in his class, I should have led with that. If you're in the Hellenistic class, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are signed up for Chris Brennan's Hellenistic astrology course, and they don't know that this reading group is going on. So I keep bringing it up because people keep being like, wow, I had no idea this was going on. So that's going on. I think that's it. Did I have a charity of mention? I mean, charities that I usually like to help out are the Bail Project. The Bail Project is it's a charity where you can give money and it'll help people pay off their bail. That I think is going to become even more important when we get the next presidential administration into the United States. And then Doctors Without Borders is another really good one that's helping out people in really difficult situations all over the globe, including Gaza. So that's another charity that I really like to give. And that's if you have the funds. I just like to throw that out there if it piques anyone's, if it inspires anyone, or if it's like a remediation that you can, double up, double dip. Maybe it's a remediation for you in your chart. Yeah. And then if you don't, like, I mean, that's okay. I also don't want to guilt anyone because we can do work for change in the world external to us. And there's a lot of work to do on the inside. So if you can't give funds to a charity, you can always work on your kindness, patience, and biases and try to work on those in the meantime and all the time. So do your best with that. We all need rest for the long game. I guess I usually do put those mind your own business days in the context of like people who might be on a strike or at a protest or something like that. Any of the mind your own business days I have mentioned, essentially when the moon is coming into contact with that Mars Pluto stuff, like be extra careful, take care of yourself. You don't have to be the hero on a dangerous day. Pick a not dangerous day to be a hero. That's what electional astrology helps us do. So all to say, thank you so much for the work that we're all doing. I'll give you a big hug. Thank you for being here. Hey, that's it. Any other questions? Hello from New Zealand. Hello from tomorrow, from yesterday. Sign up for my newsletter. Yeah, I feel like I'm forgetting something. I'm on Threads. I'm on Instagram. Yeah, that's it. Take care. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time. Have a great January. And I will see you at the end of the month, end of January. I always do it the last few days of the month. For February, I have not scheduled that yet. But my next question and response time, I have a once monthly Q&A on the second Thursday of every month. This will be January 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time. And that's going to be same place, YouTube right here. And that's where you can bring your astrology questions, astrology technique questions, and we can riff on astrology together. Okay. Thank you, everyone.